Good morning, everybody. It's Mr. Chester. I hope everyone's doing great. Doing all your online classwork. Maybe you got outside this week, enjoyed a little fresh air. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about vinyl siding. So, what is siding? Siding is the protective material usually that finishes off the outside of a house. It keeps the elements, rain, wind, snow, from entering your wall. So I'm going to show you a two-part video on how we do it. So here I am, here's my wall. What we need to do first is I need to put up my soffit panels, which I've already started a couple. Our soffit, as you can see the end of our roof, our soffit is the horizontal level part of the end of our rafters. So a soffit might not necessarily be just on the end of your roof ends, your rafter ends, but it might you might have a soffit, inside of a garage. Maybe you built a soffit for some pipes, or maybe some electrical wires. So a soffit is generally a horizontal feature, I guess, just to close something in. So in this case, our soffit's closing in the end of our rafter ends. So before I do that, first what I got to do is cut our soffit panels to length. So generally when I cut vinyl siding, I cut the material with the blade backwards. This prevents it from cracking, chipping. Everyone has their own way. Some people use plywood blades to do it. I just use a 60-tooth miter saw blade, and I just spin it backwards. Before you change your blade, remember, what are we always going to do before we do that? That's right, you're always going to unplug the saw, because if the saw isn't plugged in and there's no power connected to it, there's no way it can turn on. So I already measured my soffit depth, so I got a number of 10 1/4 inches. I already have about 7 pieces, and they will cover about 12 feet. They'll cover about 12 inches in length. So my shed is 20 feet long, so I already have 7 pieces, so I'm going to subtract those 7 pieces from 20 feet, and that gives me 13 feet. So I need about 13 pieces at 10 1/4. So before I start cutting my pieces, I'm going to set up a stop on my miter saw fence to mark all my 10 1/4 pieces. I could mark them all individually, but by setting a stop up on the saw, it'll save us the process of having to measure each one. All we're going to have to do is slide our piece of siding up to our stop, and it'll mark our piece for us. So I'm going to use just a piece of scrap wood and a wood clamp. So I'm going to measure over to the edge of my blade, 10 1/4. Mark it right on here. Take my block. And we're going to attach it right to our fence, just like that. So now all I'm going to have to do is lift my saw, put my piece of siding right up here. Now, instead of having to mark each one, I'm just sliding my piece up to this block, and I'm going to cut it. Remember, when cutting, you always want to make sure your blade's spinning at full speed before you make contact with the material. And once you're done, you want to make sure that your blade is completely stopped before lifting the blade. and we're always going to maintain a 6-inch margin of safety. That's right. So my blade, my soffit material's a little wide, so my saw didn't cut all the way through it. So all I'm going to do on each one is take my hand snips, and I'm just going to finish the cut. This generally, when you cut the vinyl siding with the miter saw, it can be a little loud, so if you're uncomfortable with it, you might want to just throw some earplugs in. Alright, so here we are. We're ready to put our soffit in. We got our 13 remaining pieces that we had to cut. So what we have to do first is show you guys how this vinyl siding and these soffit pieces work. As you can see, right there, there's an end on each side. A hook on that side, and then there's this tab over here in which the hook hooks onto. So as you can see, I'd put this over here, and that slides right over. And it interlocks it so it can't come apart. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put my soffit piece right up here, and I'm going to lock it in. Now I'm just going to take one nail, because I'll show you in a minute how this is going to work. I'm going to put one nail up to hold it, because after I'm going to put a piece of J-channel trim, and that'll hold up the other side, and I'm going to put a piece of aluminum, which I'm going to show you how to make, and that'll hold up this side. So I'm going to take it, you pull, soffit we pull tight. When we do our vinyl siding, we do not nail it tight. Our soffit we are going to nail tight. Just going to nail it. And I'll put another piece. I'll just hold that up. Now this makes it so we don't ever have to paint it, because it's pre-colored and it's plastic, so it's not going to chip, paint, peel, and it'll finish it off nice. Now, come over here for a minute. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm not the best cameraman. But as you can see in here, I have this piece of metal that's bent. It's bent at what looks like, what angle does that look like? 90 degrees, that's right. So the reason we put that is, let's move on down here. Sorry if I'm making you seasick. Is so you don't see any of the wood or the paper from behind it. So when we do put that piece up, we're just going to push it right up with a roofing nail and nail it tight. So once our soffit piece is up, you don't see any plywood, you just see a white hole, and it's weather tight, it's airtight, we're good to go. Alright everyone, we're back. Before we continue on, I'm going to explain a little bit about house wrap. So previously I put on Tyvek house wrap. What house wrap does is it's a moisture barrier. It keeps the water out. If water were to get under the siding, it can be help as an air barrier as well. Keep any slight air leaks, drafts out. What you do when you install it is, I start from the bottom. Like I tell anyone I've ever worked with, when working outside or anything that's going to encounter water, you want to think like a raindrop. So if you were to start at the top and then put your bottom piece over that, the water would slide right behind the bottom piece. So we want to work the other way around. We want to start at the bottom and overlap our piece. And we just staple it on. Just make sure you put enough staples so it doesn't blow off. And the #1 rule of Tyvek is to make sure you put it on so the letters are right side up. Does anyone know why? Think about it for a second. Because it avoids any unnecessary questions from homeowners. So it doesn't matter if it's upside down or not, but it just avoids the question of why is a Tyvek upside down. So now I did my soffit. I'm going to trim out my edges. I'm going to do my corner board and my J channel, which is going to receive the ends of our vinyl siding. It's going to trim it off. What our J channel is like this. It's like it's going to get nailed around the corner. We're going to nail through that little slot cut out there, and it's going to cover all the cut edges. Our J channel will nail nice and tight. However, our vinyl siding we're not going to nail tight. When we do nail it, I'll show you guys in a little bit, we're going to leave that nail heads out about 1/8 of an inch, so it gives the siding room to expand and contract, because in the summer it's going to expand and it's going to move. In the winter, when it's cold, and it's going to shrink on you. So this way your siding will be able to adjust with the weather and your house. So keep on keeping on. Now before we carry on, I just want to show you one quick thing. I nailed my J channel up to the bottom side of our soffit. What that's going to do is, one, see, it's going to trim off the underside so it looks nice and clean and keeps all the elements out. Two, it's going to be able to receive the edge of my siding. So once my siding gets to this top row here, I'm just going to cut it, and we're going to tuck it up here, and that cut edge is going to be hidden. All right, everybody. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trim out the ends of our fascia boards. This would be called your fascia. This would be called your shadow board. So what we're going to do is wrap these in white aluminum sheet metal. So this is going to trim it out because, I mean, let's be honest. Would you want this looking like this on your house? No way. So we're going to wrap it in metal to give it a nice weather-tight seal. And it's going to be pre-finished white aluminum. It's all painted up, so you'll never have to paint and scrape it. So I'm going to show you how to do so. But before we do, I took some measurements. So we're going to we measured up from the bottom of here of our soffit at the further from that point to that point, and that was 5 inches. Then we measured our shadow board, and that was 2 inches. So this right here, the thickness of our shadow board is 3/4, and we're going to bend this at a 90-degree bend, and that's going to trim off the edge, and we're going to cover that by 1.5 inches. So what we're going to do essentially is we're going to go up here, bend a piece like that, and come down, and that piece of metal is going to slide right up and over. I'll show you how we're going to cut that. So this tool is called a sheet metal brake. What it does is going to help us. It's going to bend our sheet metal for us, all our inside and outside 90-degree angles. So before I bend my corners and all my angles on it, I have to rip it to width. So you can't use a table saw to rip a piece like this. What we have to do is use a utility knife. So what you do first is, I already marked my pieces. All the numbers we measured up on the fascia board added up to 9.5 inches. So I got to rip this to 9.5. I'm going to line it up with the jaws of my brake. I'm going to line that up there. Line that up there. Then I'm going to clamp this. I'm going to hold it down nice and tight. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to take my utility knife. Remember, always keep your hands out of the path of the utility knife when you're cutting. And we're going to score this. I like to go twice. And then we're going to take our handle and pop it. You just heard that snap? That was a piece of practice. So now I'm going to take my piece. Our first bend was an outside angle of 1.5 inches. I'm going to slide this in here. And I'm going to mark the edge at 1.5 inches. This can get confusing, but you want to make sure you take your time and make sure you're doing the right, you're bending it in the right direction. So I'm going to line that up on my first bend, which is an 1.5 inches outside angle. Clamp it down, and I'm going to bend this up until roughly my piece is vertical at 90 degrees. So I'm going to pop the jaws. As you can see, that bent that. Now I'm going to pop it. I'm going to put this in. My next number was, I'm just going to lightly clamp that so I can still move it. My next number was 5 inches. So I'm going to mark that at 5 there. Mark that at 5 there. I'm out in my yard talking to myself. My neighbors probably think I'm crazy. You gotta loosen it up just a little. There we go, right on the money. We're gonna clamp it, and we're gonna bend this so it's vertical at 90 degrees also. Now you can see it's starting to take shape. It's starting to follow the profile of our fascia board. So now our last number, remember, was 3/4 of an inch for our shadow board. So I'm going to measure 3/4 right there. And right there. I'm going to clamp my jaws down. Pop that. So this is going to slide up under our drip edge and cover our trim. As we talked about before, just because you're a carpenter, you might not necessarily be working with wood all the time. In this case, you know, this gives we're going to cover up our wood, and it's going to give us a nice maintenance-free finish. All right, everyone. So I'm going to put up my aluminum. And you'll see how it's going to cover everything up and trim everything off. I'm going to repeat this process and make another 3 more pieces until I have enough to cover all the fascia boards on the side of my house, on my shed. So I'm just going to take that. We're going to curl our drip edge forward a little. So to start, what we're going to do, we're going to trim this. We're going to trim it for the detail of the shadow board. up. So I'll tack my first. I'll tack my first piece. Right here. Moving down, as you can see, when we tuck it up under here, it trims off the bottom. So I generally only nail the bottom edge because the top edge will be held in by our aluminum drip edge from your roof. You only want to put as many nails as you have to because it's metal. It will dimple it and you can crinkle it.